This past year has been intense. I think not just because of COVID, but we really saw a breaking point in in the Black communities and in the Indigenous communities who have just said it's enough. Like it's the health disparity really sort of reared its ugly head in terms of COVID and treatment and attention and all of that, on top of all of the other disparities that have occurred over time. Um, I'm curious, just generally, as you have watched it unfold, as you have seen things happen in Atlanta, around the country, in various cities around the country, just what have been sort of your immediate emotions, your immediate reactions to since George Floyd, specifically since that point?
It was just kind of amazing, and that people, even with all the video, footage, and it goes back to like 2016 with Colin Kaepernick, like just the whole outrage about, someone wanting to stand up for for Black lives that are being taken, in let's give it the most rounded form we can, right? In an altercation with the police officers, right? It's just, and we got this video footage, we got all this camera stuff, and of several incidences, and people just to still be so vehemently into a space of just like, well, it has to be something else, or it has to be this, or is that, and it takes something so to be filmed so horrifically. I'm old enough to remember Rodney King, that filming, you know what I mean? So, it's like, that's 1991, like now here we are in 2021, and now we're still seeing the same thing, but this time to someone's death, and just the dramatization of it to get people to see, like, okay, there's something wrong, right? There is literally something wrong, right? You can't look at that film and that video and not say like, okay, something's wrong with the system if this was even to happen at any time, right? And it's just been a space of, I tell people all the time, I feel good because at least the conversation, even though it's uncomfortable, and sometimes it's kind of swung way to the other side in some cases too, like me and my friends and my social peers, my peers I socialize with, some of the things we don't agree with because it's kind of swung too far one way and it's kind of missing the point. Sometimes you can miss the point in your goal or your focus, but it's been interesting. I say it with a smile on my face, but that's that the smile of irony, right? It's like, the tragedies, all the lives that are lost and has been lost inside of spaces like this. We are addressing some of the systemic problems that we have inside our society, right? That's the best way to put it. Like, we have some systemic issues that are deeply rooted in these spaces that we need to address. And they're being addressed.
Like the silver lining is, in a sense, it brought people to their knees enough to say, all right, let's fix this. Let's really get dirty and fix this. And is that maybe the silver lining for you?
I don't think we're anywhere near fixing it. I think we're in the space, for me personally, my view would be that we're just now in the space where we're being able to address it. We have to identify, right? So we have to identify the issue before we can address the issue. And then here comes the fix, maybe, if I'm breaking it down into process. Because I've been in this space in my lifetime. I've seen so many times that we get off to such a good start and then we get sidetracked, or society or the world gets sidetracked, or whatever communities is fighting for, it gets sidetracked and the message gets kind of lost in this. But this time it seems it's caught in a little bit, catching a little bit more steam.
What do you see as, like, what do you feel from your perspective and the surroundings and the community that you have? What do you feel is maybe the issue that you do see some genuine, true steps of progress toward identifying and solution? And what do you think, you mentioned earlier, you said sometimes things go so far, to one way that it misses the point. What do you feel is something that's missing the point? Say more to that.
It's just, it's the lack of focus. Once again, if you have an issue, from my understanding, I'm not a politician, but I grew up off the edge of a very political era. And so, the organizations that I grew up not within, because I'm after that generation, but I was given a lot of their messages. They had a clear message. They had, what do you want? justice is not okay. Justice is the ends, the mean. What do you want? What is going to speak to justice? What's going to speak to equality? What's going to speak to fairness? Instead of just saying, hey, we want justice, we want justice. Like, what is that? What, you know what I mean? And so I think just being more pointed, but once again, that's through organizational leadership.
Can you give an example? Like, can you give to a specific aspect? Because it's in layers. It's an onion, right? There's like this issue and that particular issue. There's systemic racism when it comes to, so say, the prison system or policing system, right?
No one's yet to sit down, even the organizations that we have that are reputable or carrying steam. I haven't seen them sit down with any leaders and have a correspondence like King did, like Malcolm did, like the Panthers did. I haven't seen that. You know what I mean? I see a lot of talking in forums and congregating, what do you call these things, rallies, but then that's not where laws get passed. That's not how things move. When I see the Fortune 500 companies sitting in front of Congress and questioning, now we know there's about to be some movement. You know what I'm saying? When they sit before these committees and have conversations. No one sat before a committee, to the best of my knowledge, you know, and had a conversation about what we need to do moving forward. And for me, that'll be the biggest signal of, okay, actually, there's going to be something. You know, the Civil Rights Bill happened with a United States committee meeting. It didn't happen with a rally in wherever, in a stadium, in a park, in a field, on a street corner. That's not how I understand politics to work, or our political system to work.
What's maybe, and I know there's so many issues, but what do you feel is maybe the disparity issue, or what is the issue that you feel the most passionate about? Is it policing? Is it housing? Is it, Stacey Abrams took on voting because that was her issue. So she took on like the idea of like, this is the issue I need to build sort of my kingdom around, and she did it. So what do you feel is maybe the issue that you feel the most passionate about in all of these layers that need to be addressed?
I think for me, I address it in my space by, once again, just being inclusive to other people who are different. You know what I mean? Like we have to come into a space where we just can't embrace different. We don't embrace differences. We don't respect differences as in the same. I just met a lady yesterday. She has an organization where she's dealing with these mothers, and they're all mothers, and they bond on the fact that they're mothers. She's got in Cameroon and Japan, across Asia and Europe. All these mothers get together on these Zoom calls, and they exchange stories about motherhood, and they bond in that space. So finding the space to bond inside of humanity is when all things are changed. When everybody's able to see that we all kind of want the same thing, right? We want security. We want to have a family. We want to live our life. We want to have peace. We want to be,
Yoga is kind of your community a little bit. Is that what you feel? Like, do you want to feel like do you feel that there is not enough inclusiveness in the yoga communities? And be honest.
Oh, absolutely not. Yoga is, I tell, as hippy dippy as it, yoga is so hippy dippy as it was drawn up, maybe in the 60s, but now it's probably one of the most affluent spaces, social spaces in America. Most people there are educated, highly educated. Most people there is not really a cheap practice. If you're in a studio setting, it's not a it's cheap. It's more expensive than a gym membership for the most degree for coming here a couple times a week, or as much as your practice. So it's a pretty affluent space, a pretty influential space, and it's become a space of trend. So no, yoga is once again, I wouldn't say it's all, arm warm hugging kumbaya in this space. It's there are some very stiff spaces, just like America. The community that the studio's in is going to be represented. The attitude is going to be inside of that space. I taught at a few studios around this town. And if I go to a studio in a certain area, the atmosphere, whichever they live, the condition is how they practice their yoga.
I had someone say to me not long ago, he said to me, and he, like yourself, is a Black gentleman in Atlanta, and he said to me, I just feel like the yoga community has been far too silent when it came to the outcry of Black Lives Matter and Black bodies matter. And I'm just kind of curious, as someone who's really in it and who is an instructor and who teaches other people, have you felt the effect of that? Have you had to confront that in your community? Has there been a space where you've had to really examine this?
For sure. I've been called names. I've been not supported by studio owners in spaces of them being aware of this going on. constantly being challenged, because, once again, I'm not what you think of was marketed as a yoga instructor throughout the world. That's not the marketing on it. So then people marketing, get into Edward Bernays and all that kind of things, is very powerful psychology behind all that. But once again, you kind of get a pass because inside of their communities, they are more moderate. And that's the kind of sad part about it, right? If somebody practices yoga, they generally have a more open mind. And then, when, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was in training, getting the information, the feedback on the demographic, only 5 to 8% of Americans practice yoga. Out of 350 some odd million people, or 30, whatever it is, million people, only 5% of that practices yoga. So, so in these spaces, these people are the oddballs inside of their community, but then they still come in and they still have, I'll call them for the sake of it, to be forgiving, unconscious biases. You know what I mean? I've walked in the yoga studio before and they treated me like I was homeless. And at that time I was teaching I was seeing 800 people a week teaching yoga.
Tell that story. I think that's a really important, and I think it's a very important story, and it's a good story.
So I go into one of the most popular studios because that's what I do, because it's hard for me to practice in the studios that I teach at, because I just can't really get into that space. I can kind of go in a different studio and kind of melt in and no one know who I am. So I walk into this yoga studio. I sweat a lot. So because I'm a hot yoga instructor. I lose anywhere from, long story short, I lose 7 to 8 pounds worth of water weight in the class. So I sweat a lot. So I had a bag with a bunch of towels in there because I know how I'm going to sweat and I don't want to, be courteous in the floor. So I walk in, I had this bag on. I probably had just got finished teaching, or I had a class. So I walked in, I had tights on, I had a trench coat on. And so I wear women's yoga tights because they don't make a lot of men yoga tights. A whole other thing. But I got probably $150 pair of yoga tights on. Like if somebody knows yoga, they see me with my tights on. The lady, the instructor, dressed me like I was homeless. She was like, "Hey, oh yeah, cool, you signed up. Oh, we accept homeless people too." Like, what her words were, "We accept people off the street." And so once again, so it's kind of, I was with two other male yoga teachers, and it was crazy. One was white, so of course she didn't address him like that way, and he's probably more hippy dippy than me. Like he doesn't wear deodorant and all those type of things. And so we go into the class and we practice in the class. She walked by me and she was just like, "Oh, his nails are clean." In the middle of the class, right? And so like I've been in yoga long enough, man. That was the first time that I've was kind of overtly dealt with it like that point in the class. But I mean, of course, I've gotten looks and stuff until people can figure out what's going on. But the irony was, right, once again, one of my life lessons is like my patience and my temper and not overreacting. And so she got her karma, right? She got her lesson immediately, because at the end of the class, 4 of the students in her class ran up to me because they had practiced with me at some point somewhere around the city, because I taught at 15 different studios. I'm teaching 20 some classes a week. And so then now I'm in the back cleaning up. So I can kind of see her at the corner of my eye talking to the students at the front desk. And so I walk out and she's just like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a teacher." So I just kind of like smile, and I don't, I'm not a simp, so I didn't really have any words for it, because for someone to treat anybody like that, it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? To make such assumptions, and this is the person who's leading the practice. So the person leading the practice is not practicing awareness. How can they be passing awareness on to somebody else? And that's just the way I see it.
That's so good. That's so good. You have to practice the awareness to give it away.
But once again, you have to start, right? They got to be in an environment. So then they run across the teachers, and this is just one teacher at one place. And I won't name the teacher. I know her name, and I won't name the place.
No need.
But everybody needs to begin. They're practicing yoga. But it's interesting, man. It's interesting, like that type of blindness. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of lack of awareness and insight. And I have so many Black students that come to me or take my class, or even go to places because I'm leading there. But then they come to me in later spaces and times, talking about how the other teachers, like some of the teachers' class, or what happened in the class with another teacher. And these people are just like, like almost drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I'm a yoga instructor. I practice yoga, so I am, right? That's not necessarily how it works. And not saying that I'm the most righteous or anything like that, like, of course, but I just think some things as far as like human decency and courtesy, like things you were taught when you were 5, all of us were taught when we were 5 or 6 years old, you know what I mean? Like, being decent and being understanding, especially in this space of service, and all we're doing is giving service, but it's a lot of that, man. It's a lot of that.
You brought something up that I thought was really good. You said, because you have Black students that come to your classes at various places that you teach in the city. And I'm curious if you can speak just how can yoga contribute potentially to a collective resilience? We see among the Black communities and Black families across the country this collective trauma, right? This really enhanced collective trauma that everyone's feeling right now, maybe more than ever, maybe more than 50 years ago, because it's finally getting to a place where folks are saying enough is enough. In what way do you feel, and maybe you've seen it changes in your students and transformations in yourself and the students you've taught, but how do you feel like something like this could be a participant in contributing to a better collective resilience within Black communities?
I mean, in any community, like I always said, not to be like so 2020 or PC, but it's an everybody thing. And of course I can speak to, I'm speaking in light of the Black community, because that's my space, that's my culture. Right. It's very underrepresented. As I teach across town, the more dominant Black sides of town don't have yoga. It just doesn't exist. Even though you have people who in these areas who have money enough to practice the yoga, but they have to practice, they'll do it on their way home or on back to their neighborhoods, because it doesn't exist in those spaces. Anything that you practice in a space of saying, hey, pay attention. And that's all yoga for me is actually the philosophy outside of the asana is pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And so I think it'll serve as far as being able to identify your own movements in order to prove your immediate existence. And by proving, once again, it's like if you can improve your life, you improve the life of everybody around you. If you can come to a healthier way of thinking, a healthier dynamic of dealing with conflict, dealing with controversy, dealing with challenges, it perpetuates, right? You're not making these extra ripples in the pool that we all walk around in or we move around in. Yeah, don't get me wrong. There are some Black instructors I know who are working, in the parks and in these spaces with people.
How, when you do yoga, when do you feel the most centered in your body? I think there's definitely a conversation right now of George Floyd cried out, "I can't breathe." He wasn't the first one. Eric Garner did it, and so many others, right? Like the list is really far too long. It's really far too long. But the idea of I can't breathe, right? And yoga is this entire practice that does the opposite, right? It's this thing that teaches you to breathe, at least it's supposed to. So you went from a world where you grew up fighting, right? And so you understand martial arts and you grow up, you understand fighting and you understand that aspect. And then you understand this entirely different aspect, this entire transformation of learning how to breathe. Speak to that transition, because even that transition in you might speak to another person within your community, within any community, that could pull something from that and maybe find it in and for themselves.
Man, the ability to notice your breathing pattern causes for a high sense of awareness. It's one of the very few things in our life, heartbeat, breath, a lot of our autonomic bodily functions that we take for granted. But breathing is one that we can consciously control, but it takes a lot of focus, more than we want to give it. And so for me, it's less about being still or sitting down, doing your own. Some people sitting still for 10 minutes, they can't do it. Their brain activity, you know what I mean? So, athletes do it. They breathe when they run. They hit the space of nirvana. Breathing for me, is a key indicator. I watch people because I lead practice, and I can just see their anxiety build through their breathing pattern. The shorter the breathing pattern, the higher the anxiety. The smoother the breathing pattern, the calmer they are, the better practitioners. That can come from just being in an environment repetitively and being comfortable in the discomfort. That could be, them practicing, or a combination of the two. Stress response is our shortening of the breath. First sign of the beginning of anxiety attack, or or whatever, because now you're depleting your body of oxygen, and then now no one thinks properly. on top of all that. But it's a part of human function, man. So just being able to breathe and having those examples of seeing people who are, who in a cry for their life.
How do you tell a mama that? How do you tell, say, a Black mother that, or her son that, and they can't breathe, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're angry, they're rightfully feeling all of those things because of every weight that they carry in their personal life, in the societal trauma, and all of it that comes together.
Man, one of the most powerful lessons I got, like, yo, we cannot help anybody. This is how he told me. All we can do is assist them when they're ready. And so a lot of times by the extra push, we actually alienate them a little bit more. People are going to come around when they come around, or when our trendsetters start to, and that's happening. Like, I got a lot of athletes and stuff that are practicing yoga, start to bring these things to light. And then now people are more comfortable in the space and they'll follow that way, like a positive way or a positive aspect to a trend or something like that. But, you can just hope, man, or or I think me and you were talking about earlier, just hold space. So, moving forward in the future, looking, just I'm talking to different people and just not forcing anything on anybody, but, having a space in these neighborhoods that are funded, that can be open, that can function, and the teachers can not live under the poverty line, trying to hold these facilities open, will be the best space, just holding space. So, you ride by the building, you see it. One day you pull into the building. One day you're tired enough, or you're interested enough, or you're intrigued enough, or you've been drawn that way through some type of marketing from an athlete coming to practices and stuff like that. So just basically just holding space for them. So how do I hold space? Just maintaining my presence in this space, and but that's facilitating relationships with people outside of me. It's probably the best way for me to hold space and allow them time, right? It's like I'm buying time for them inside of this space. Or when you're in the struggle, for the lack of a better term, just trying to survive, man. And somebody comes to you with this piece of advice which could change everything, but you're so in the middle of your battle, your personal battle, your war, you can't hear it because you're so focused on this fight. All we can do is kind of just do our part and hold that space for them. So when they do get the opportunity, or when they do come to the awareness of those that do, and when they do, that space will be available for them to come to and have some of the best yoga in the